very good. Thank you. Need some. Can I tell you something? Can we talk? I'm not much of a fisherman. The neighborhood boys and I would sometimes go fishing up at the city park into a little lake, actually a lagoon, actually kind of a muddy, stinky lagoon. But it was there, not too far. We'd ride our bikes up. I was raised by a single mother. We didn't have something so fancy as a fishing pole, but one of the neighborhood boys would usually lend me one of theirs if it was what do you call it, thing with a reel on it? A rod reel, yeah. See? So you can tell already that I'm probably advanced in my skills of fishing. Well, I never caught a fish in that muddy lagoon, not once growing up. I don't know if I had any bait. I don't remember. That's probably important, right? And so you could probably teach me maybe a thing or two about fishing. Yeah. I said I never caught a fish. I'm going to have to take that back. I'm going to walk that back just a wee bit. I did catch a fish. It was at the fair, and we were given these ping pong balls. And out in front of us was this large group of very small fish bowls, and inside them were fish, goldfish. And you threw the ping pong ball, and my brother was given one, and I was given one. His missed. It bounced right off, and I threw mine in, and it went in, so I caught a fish. Now, it might not be how you catch fish, but that works, I can guarantee you. We didn't eat it, in case you're wondering. We kept it. That thing stayed alive for about 2.5 weeks, I think. And then passed away, and then we flushed it down the toilet. What a fisherman am I. You may be thinking, JJ, the reason you go fishing is very simple. It's to catch fish. Yeah, I haven't done that part yet. I've gone to the lake. I've drowned bait, if I was even using bait. I don't know. Yeah, but I haven't really caught fish. One thing did concern me in all of my fishing is that I was not allowed to bring home dead fish caught from the lake. So it's a good thing I didn't ever catch any, because my mom would have thrown a fit. She didn't like to clean fish, and she didn't like to cook fish. She didn't like to eat fish. So it was not necessarily a good thing to bring home fish. And I didn't know how to clean fish, and I didn't know how to cook fish, so I would have been kind of up a creek there. And so she gave us severe warnings not to bring dead fish home. Early, I was probably 8. Early on, we got a visit from my father. And as you may have already known, my father left very early on, and he moved to Miami, where he was a newscaster, a journalist for TV News in Miami. And really the most I ever saw of my father growing up was a picture of him in his tie and his suit. As a journalist with like all the clocks behind him, we used to do that with Walter Cronkite. No, that's wrong. Kite. There we go. Was on, and you'd see little things, or some of the other old-time newscasters and such. And so I would see him there. Well, he actually came and visited us one time, which was kind of neat. My mom says, your father's coming. Oh, that person in the picture, great. And so he came, and what did he do? He took us fishing. Now, the reason I remember that is not because it was a glorious time with my father. No, it was, if we catch something, we got to bring home dead fish to my mom. Well, don't worry, I didn't catch anything. But my brother did. He caught a fish, and my father caught a few. I don't remember anything about what happened to fish afterwards. Just my mind's blank on that. But we didn't cook them up or fry or eat them as far as I know. Today's parable is interesting in that it's about fishing. And I really wish I would have known this method of fishing, because this is a method I think I might have had success with. It's this parable called the parable of the dragnet. And what is the dragnet? Well, it's a large fishing net that's weighted, and it usually stretched between two boats, and then you simply move the net through the water and it gathers up everything. Well, fish you want and fish you don't want. And you draw it up on shore, and then you throw away the ones you don't, and you keep the ones you do. Very simple. Anyone do that, by the way? Anyone use do net fishing? Okay, we have a couple that have done that. That's kind of neat. Okay, I've never done that. See, I wouldn't have to worry about the bait thing, and I wouldn't have to worry about, just drag it through. You're going to get something, right? Probably no chew for me, but you get something, and so that's the parable that we want to look at today. A fishing story, if you will. I'm just going to return to that specific story, the dragnet. He says, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet, which is cast into the sea, and it gathers fish of every kind. And when it was filled, they drew it up onto the beach, and they sat down and gathered the good fish and put those into containers or baskets. But the bad fish they threw away. Now you might be thinking, well, how do you determine the good from the bad? Well, I think some of it is determined just like you might. There's fish that you like to eat and fish that might have value in selling, and you would keep those. And then those you didn't want, or the wrong type of fish, or just something that you don't like, would be tossed or put back in the lake. But in addition to that, in Leviticus, we're given some rules, and so the Jews had to be careful to eat only clean fish, and so it had to have fin. It had to have scales and fins in order for them to keep it. So if it was something that was in the water that didn't have scales or fins, they had to not eat that. I don't know if they could grind it up and feed it to their dogs, or if they just had to pitch it. I'm not sure. But I would think that, given the time, that they would try to utilize any product from the sea that they would have. But not sure about that. And then verses 49 and 50 take this seemingly simple story of fishing using the dragnet and the separation at the end to drive home a message. And you see in verse 49, it says, "So it will be at the end of the age." So Jesus is now saying, this is just a simple story here, but it has ramifications for thinking about the end of the age. Now, some translations will say there that so it will be at the end of the world. And I'm just going to say that's a bad translation of that, the Greek word behind that, aeon. The age is the right translation. It's not at the end of the world, it's the end of the age. So our first question might be, well, what age? What age is he talking about? When is this going to happen? Because he's going to say that this gathering in and this separation is a lot like what happens in his kingdom. And he's saying that some of those who are gathered in are going to be tossed out. And worse. So our first thought might be, well, when's the end of the age? And do we have some time before that starts and such? So, the end of the age is, we got a couple choices. It can be when Jesus comes, because there's a change in age at the time between the Old Testament and the time of Christ. Well, we kind of know that can't be it, because it didn't come then. So we didn't have the end of the age when Jesus came. But that was at the end of the age, the transition to a new age. So now we figure, well, it's got to be, what did Jesus institute? Well, he instituted his church. He instituted his church. And so how long will that age go? Well, it's gone about 2,000 years, a little bit less. up to now. And but there will come a time when just like the age before us, the age of the law, that happened before us, that this age of grace, will come to an end. So that would be the most logical, the most easy thought to think. At the end of the church age, there will be this reckoning. Well, what's the next age? The next age is called the kingdom age. If you're into end-time events, you'd probably call it the millennial kingdom. And somehow between the transformation and he doesn't go into it, and that's good, between the transition between this age of grace that we're living in and the next age, the age of the kingdom, the age when, to make it simple, Christ comes and is ruling on earth. That's going to be the big change. What's happening in the millennial kingdom? Christ comes and he's ruling on the earth. And before that really gets instituted, there's going to be this judgment. Well, we could go all through these parables and be quite happy without the subject of judgment coming up. It is one of the least favorite subjects that we could think about. Why? Because Christ comes and it says, I get to be the judge. And see, as long as I can be my own judge, I can justify just about any behaviors you want. If you doubt that, just hang around me for a while, and you'll see that, hey, I can just ask my wife if you doubt it. Does he like really fast and he's like horrible to you? And she'll say, no, he really isn't. And so I hope to change that. But no, it's terrible. And so, but we can justify anything as long as we're the judge. But see, it doesn't matter because Christ himself is going to be judging. So, he said, so it will be at the end of the age that angels will come forth and take out the wicked from among the righteous. And will throw them into the furnace of fire, and in that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Ugly. End of parable. Oh, Jesus, that was kind of a downer. Do you realize that kind of offended me when you said you're going to like judge everybody and then like we'll take in some, but the rest are going to go to this place of fire and torment. As a matter of fact, a lot of churches won't even talk about judgment, and I think that's a great disservice to their congregations. It is one of his 8 parables where he's giving specifically, remember, Jesus is teaching these things to his disciples, his followers. He says, these 8 things I need you to understand. I need you to know. And this one is about as clear as they get. He says judgment will come. And it's going to be instituted. And it doesn't matter if we say, well, I'm sorry, I just don't agree with that. You see, it doesn't matter if we stand and say, you know what, I don't believe in a God that would do that. See, the judgment is coming. In fact, the angels are coming down to institute. It's happening. So the question is, well, where do we stand? That's the question, right? Well, JJ, it's far in the future. We're not quite really sure when that might be. We probably are okay. Let's not get too excited about it. But you see, there's a reason he told this parable to his disciples, who are much further away from this type of judgment than we are, and that this type of judgment is supposed to stir our hearts to change now, knowing that we all, whether living or dead, will face this judgment. We will all face this judgment. And so, Jesus shares this story of judgment. And one of my favorite Bible games to play is, where have I heard this story before? Well, this one. You can't go through the New Testament or the Old Testament without hearing it many times, in many ways. So we could come at it from lots of different angles, but we most recently heard this story when? We heard it when we heard the story of the wheat and tares. The story of the wheat and tares. Now I'm just going to grab Jesus' explanation of the wheat and tares and see if it doesn't sound a little bit familiar to you. In verse 40 of chapter 13, Jesus says in his explanation, "So just as the tares are gathered up and burned with fire, so shall it be at the end of the age." Oh, we got the fire, we have the end of the age. This is sounding familiar. "And the Son of Man will send forth his angels." Oh, we got the angels here, and they're gathering out of his kingdom all the stumbling blocks and those who will commit lawlessness, and will throw them into the furnace of fire. In a place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Well, that sounds a lot like what we just read. Matter of fact, it sounds so much the same. Why did he do it twice? Why give us two of those out of these 8 parables? You see, in that first parable, however, is focused on judgment. But he also focuses on the goodness of God and the way that it starts out. And he plants good seed. The enemy comes and plants bad seed. Remember that? And then the disciples are all concerned. Didn't you plant good seed? He says, of course. It talks about his sovereignty over the whole thing. He knows immediately what's transpired. But the disciples, they were asleep. They didn't know. And he says an enemy has done this. The enemy has done this. And then at the very end, it says the whole purpose of this in verse 43, "Then at that point the righteous in this millennial kingdom, when the wicked have been taken away, then the righteous will shine forth as a sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears to hear, let him hear." That there's a goodness involved in this whole process. And the goodness is that this brings forth true life, we would say, in his kingdom in the future here, since it's future focused. But it brings forth life. And we can rest in assurance of that. And there's an importance in understanding the judgment. We see a lot of similarities between those two stories. We see a few key differences. This story, this dragnet story, has virtually no focus on that good end. It has no focus on the righteous shining like their Father of lights in heaven. There's none of that future focus of all the goodness that's going to come. It's just like, it's focused mostly on the wicked. Yeah, we're going to gather the good, the righteous ones, but then the wicked. There's going to be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Kind of interesting, I hadn't realized this before, I'll throw it in there for you. This gnashing of teeth, I always thought, okay, they're going to be wailing, crying, and they're going to be just grinding their teeth in agony. That's kind of how you kind of took that, usually. And so I did a little study on this gnashing of teeth, and you know what? Every time it's used in the Bible, it's talking about evil people gnashing their teeth either at God or towards God's elect. And so what this is saying, I think, is that there's going to be weeping. And why? Why is there going to be weeping there? Is because there's going to be evil there. And that evil is gnashing. Let's try that. It's good for your soul. Think of it like an angry dog. Doesn't mean good. You should be doing it. No one's doing it. It's like an idiot. But there's this gnashing of teeth going on. This is a bad place to be. And why is there weeping and mourning and crying? Because of this evil present there. It's an unpleasant place, in other words. It's not just, oh, woe is me. There's still evil there. And so we draw out of that the goodness. Here's your choices. Life with God. Life forever apart from God, where there's evil. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out which one I'm going to choose, right? It's just like, why doesn't everybody see that? Why don't we all see that? But there's more than just our eternal destinies that are at stake here. It's how we live now. It's how the disciples that Jesus is talking to are living now. I think of some of the other times that this is mentioned, this whole idea of judgment. And I think of Romans chapter 2. And there's literally hundreds of times, but a lot of times people like to separate out the difference between what the Gospels say. This one verse out of Romans chapter 2, verse 16. He's talking about his gospel. He's setting up the stage in Romans. It's probably his greatest letter that he writes. He talks about the gospel. And in chapter 2, verse 16, he's talking about the law and how it's written upon our hearts and how our conscience bears witness, and our own thoughts will either confirm that we are absolutely in the faith or deny it. And then he says in verse 16, on that day, according to my gospel, I like how he claims it's my gospel, according to my gospel, God will judge the secrets of men through Christ Jesus. In a book that's focused entirely on the gospel, he says, here's the first thing you need to understand, that there will be a judgment. There will be a judgment. In the beautiful, beautiful, lofty book of Ephesians that Paul wrote, it's just absolutely glorious. I do hope you get to go through it before I leave. I'm sure you have gone through it before. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And it's focused on the grace of God in the gospel. And in chapter 2, this is what Paul says in Ephesians. You were dead in your trespasses and in your sins, in which you were formerly walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, which would be Satan himself, of the Spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. Among them we too all formerly lived in the lust of our flesh. He's setting the stage. He says, we're all in the same boat here. No one walks into the grace of God saying, yeah, I'm seeing that this might be a good thing. No, we all come in damaged goods. We all have fallen short. And he says we all formerly walked according to this path. And we lived in the lust of our flesh, indulging the desires of the flesh and of the mind. Some of us were worse than others, for certain. And we're by nature, he says, children of wrath. What wrath? Oh, you mean like Satan's wrath against us? Yeah, we were victims of Satan's wrath. That's what he's talking about. No, it's God's wrath here. God's wrath against sin. Someone once asked me, be saved. Be saved from what? I said, be saved from God. We often think we get saved out of this torment. We're actually saved from God. Because God's wrath is against those who do unrighteous deeds. Not a popular message. We were by nature children of wrath, even as the rest, but God, thank goodness for the but here. But God, being rich in mercy because of his great love which he had loved us, even when we were dead in those transgressions, even at that point, he made us alive together with Christ. Wow. Even when we were dead in our transgressions, he made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved. And raised us up with him and seated us in the heavenly places. And he goes on to talk about how wonderful those blessings are to be seated in his heavenly places. And he leaves behind that kind of scary part up front. And it's easy for us to leave behind. And yet, why is that there? Because there will be a judgment for sin. Judgment. There's a parable at the very end of Matthew. It's actually a kingdom parable. We won't go through the kingdom parables at the end of Matthew. It's, I think, in chapter 25. There's several right in through here. They're all about the judgment. He's getting near the end of Jesus' ministry, and he shares some of these kingdom parables again. And he starts out in 25 with the kingdom of heaven. It will be like comparable to these 10 virgins who and he tells that story. Then he goes, and this is the next story in the line, and he says, and it will be like the kingdom of heaven, in other words. And it will be like a man about to go on a journey, who has called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, and to another 2, and to another 1, each according to his own ability. Notice that. And he went on his journey. Immediately one who received 5 talents, you've heard this before, right? He goes out and traded and gained 5 more talents. In the same manner, the one who had received 2 talents gained 2 more. But the one who had received 1 talent went away, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. Now, after a long time, the master of the slaves came and settled accounts with them. So what's happening? The king has gone, the king is coming back. Sound familiar? Sound a little bit like what we just had. The one who had received the 5 talents, and by the way, how much is this 5 talents? This is a very conservative estimate, very conservative. A talent was worth about $250,000. 5 talents, a lot, right? Be over $1 million, right? So he gave him like a lot of money. And he wanted to see what they did. A lot of people will get kind of upset with the guy with 1. Well, you only gave him 1. What could he do with 1? Well, that's $250,000 right there. Might be able to do something with that, right? And you know the story, he's going to be condemned for it. The others come back and they've doubled their money. And they've got the one with 5 has now got 10. And he says, well done. Well done. Enter the joy of your master. And they're loud. And then they got the one guy who dug a hole and hid it. And he's going to be condemned, isn't he? Don't we feel a little bit bad for him? we kind of think, really? I mean, you're going to take away the one he has? So really? Jesus isn't being very nice there. But listen to the response. Think about the heart attitude of the response of that man who had 1. He said, and the one who had received the 1 talent came up and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, gathering where you scattered no seed. Think about that. Does that describe Christ? For some people, that describes Christ. We think he's hard. He's willing to reap where he doesn't sow, and he's willing to sow where he doesn't reap. I think I messed that up. He comes to him, and he says, I know the type of person you are, and so I gave your money. Here, I've got it still. It's yours. What did Christ just do in this parable? He's the master here, the king. He sowed to him the talent. He sowed the talent to him. Of all the people who could come back to him and say, no, you try to reap where you don't sow. No, this guy was included. In fact, it started out the whole story saying he did it according to their ability. So this guy had the ability to do something with this money. The reason he's going to be condemned is it never took hold. He couldn't see the grace of God being given to him. He never receives it. He keeps it out. He buries it. You know, God's not going to give me anything. I'm going to stand on my own 2 feet, thank you very much. If he wants his money back, I'll give him his money back. You know what the other people said when they talked about the money given to them? They didn't say, I took this money. He said, the money you entrusted to us, we took and doubled. Money, it's a blessing, it's a gift that you entrusted to us. It's like they received it, they understood it was from the hand of God, in our parable, the hand of the king here. And they did something with it. Their hearts responded to it. And God blessed their activity with it. And they went away. Here this man judges the great judge. Here he says, you are a hard man. A hard man? Yeah, you're a hard man. I knew how you were. You're not righteous in the least. And so I get it. And what's Jesus respond? It's great. It's absolutely wonderful. He says, if you thought I was a hard man who reaped where I did not sow, if that's where you were at, then you should have been all the more diligent. You should have at least, and he calls them, you wicked and lazy slave. He says, you should at least put it in the bank and I could have come back and had interest with it. See, he challenges even the notion that he believes he's a hard man. Because if he believed he was a hard man, he would have done something. Instead, the man doesn't even live up to the condemnation he gives the judge. And that doesn't receive the gift of God. He doesn't take it into his heart. He rejects it. He, in fact, condemns the giver of the gift as being someone who can't be trusted, a hard man. And he condemns himself with his own words. And that's the man who gets kicked out. Not because he was just an incompetent bungler of money, but because he never receives the very gift of God. Brothers and sisters, most of us in here have received the gift of God. Maybe not all of us have, but it's something to consider. When Christ comes and tells us of judgment, not to condemn us and throw us out into the darkness where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. He comes with grace and love, and he says, I will forgive you. I will, in fact, empower you to live the very life that I'm asking you to live. I will say, well done, good and faithful servant. You will respond to me, and I will equip you. That's the message of Christ. And in that, you can have joy. In that, you can have the peace, the very things our hearts desire. And with that joy and with that peace, we can reach out to others. If that doesn't sound familiar, if that's like, no, that's on the outside, I just ask that you stay behind today and just sit and talk with us a little bit about it. Let me get to know you a little bit more. And we will pray, because sometimes that next step is a hard step to take. I was raised in a non-Christian home, so I'm right there with you. I came to faith very late. And so I can pray with you as you kind of walk down those steps together. For those of us who are part of this kingdom, and you know we are, does our life really, truly reflect the fact that he is on the throne, that he's sovereign, that he will judge the living and the dead, that we ourselves will face that judgment? Does our life show that? Does it demonstrate that? If not, then let's go to him and say, Lord, I just need to repent. I need to repent and just cherish what you've given me. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for who you are. We thank you for your grace. We thank you that you're mindful that we are but dust, and that you equipped us and enable us to live a life different from the life we live. We thank you for that in your Son's holy name. And God's people said, amen.